It is very, very hard to impossible to get funding from the federal government to do truly high-risk pioneering science. You might say, like, how could that be? In general, when you get funded by the government, my lab's been funded by the government for many years, you get funded for work that is already completed. You show it to them in a grant. You say, this is what I want to do. You get the money, and wow, the paper comes out like the same year. How did that happen? And then you use the money to fund the next thing. Every card-carrying laboratory head knows this. Why? Because when you put in a grant that says, this is a really exciting idea, they're not going to fund that. So this is why philanthropy and private money comes into science and is very exciting and enticing to scientists, because they can start testing things that the federal government funding bodies are just too conservative to test.
But that also leaves it open to manipulation by bad actors.
The whole system is, there's no way to bulletproof the system against bad actors, meaning people who fudge data, or I think the more sinister aspect of my field are these individuals who come to a laboratory and go, I want a job. Being a postdoc, you're not paid much. Oftentimes they have families, they're under stress. I'm not justifying their actions. And people go, how do you get the job at the best places? Well, you get it by publishing papers in really great journals and with your name first. So what does that lead to? It leads to really high ambition people working very, very hard. And science is hard. A lot of experiments fail. And some people will just figure out that if they can just give the lab director, figure out their pet hypothesis, like figuring out what mommy or daddy like most, and give them those results, those people get promoted very quickly. Now, in the long run, they don't do well. Or what you'll find is they often just switch to an entire new area of science when they start their lab. They kind of get there. And then years later, or even a year later, you go, whatever happened to that result? Well, if you ask people in the laboratory, postdocs and graduate students, it's sort of, I think probably like any career path, they know the truth. So if you ask them, what do you think of that paper? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. That means it's bullshit.
Well, shouldn't they be allowed to like have one of those like witness things where they do their voice differently and shade their face?
Well, the problem is they're all colleagues. And
that study is bullshit.
And science is weird too, because unlike in UFC or something like that, everyone's really nice to each other's faces. They're like, oh yeah, great to see you, great to see you. Then you get the paper, anonymous peer review, and then they're like, that's when people attack each other, kill people's grants, kill people's papers. Science is it's not a cutthroat game, but it's a very human game. And now, I also want to highlight, because I feel like as an ambassador for my field, I do want to say that there are excellent scientists who care so very much about the truth and who go through every detail of every paper. Their families suffer. Everybody suffers as the consequence of their neurotic tendency. But those people are the heroes of science, because they won't let something go to publication unless they know it's absolutely watertight.
I think what you said is very important, that it's a very human thing.
Yeah, well,
subject to human emotions and human instincts and ego and jealousy and
a partner at home who's probably like, hey, when are you going to get out of graduate school and we're going to actually move out of this one-bedroom apartment where I want kids? Or all our friends are like taking vacations in Tulum and we're like suffering here. And or people who think, you get a PhD and that guarantees a win. I mean, all it does is give you the opportunity to keep competing. So when you see people at the best institutions, or even somebody at a not one of the top institutions who's able to keep their lab funded over a long period of time, that says one of two things. It says they're either really good at picking questions and being very consistent, or they are very good at hiring people that are extremely careful and hardworking, or sometimes both. But listen, the bigger the labs, the higher the probability of a bad apple.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. It's
just stunning when something like the amyloid plaques issue in terms of Alzheimer's is established and stays for so long.
Well,
there was decades of like people were acting on that bad. It wasn't just bad. It was falsified data.
Well,
right?
It was truly falsified data, and there's a whole other aspect to the sociology of science that I think is not often discussed, which is that there's a huge incentive to being promoted by your elders, by your graduate advisor and postdoc advisor, because they are the ones that write the letters that get you promotions, et cetera. And so what tends to happen is people tend to continue to do science that pleases their elders. Now, for myself, I had both the curse and the blessing of my undergraduate advisor, graduate advisor, and postdoc. We're all incredible people and scientists in different ways. I was very, very blessed. But the first one killed himself. He had a bad depression, killed himself. Second one, cancer at 50. Third one, had a heart attack across the desk from me, first day of work at Stanford. He was my postdoc advisor. Eventually died of pancreatic cancer. So the joke in my field is you don't want me to work for you, right? Like it's like a death sentence. Now they're all dead. But the good is a terrible thing to be orphaned in science because promotions, things like that, other people stepped in and helped me, and I'm very grateful to those people. But one of the blessings, the hidden blessings, the silver lining in all this is like I didn't have to please anybody. And so when it came time to do a podcast or to look at data or review a paper, I was not worried about pleasing anyone. But prior to that, I'll tell you, I've been asked to write letters for people's tenure. Can this person have a job for life or not? They get 10 to 12 letters. And I've had people say, hey, listen, we're having a really hard time getting letters for this person. And, this person really needs tenure and they've got a family and, and you look at the work and you go, and you want to say no, and you can't because you don't want that person to review your paper and axe your next paper. Oh. Now, I've been very lucky because I don't, first of all, I think it's maybe just the way I'm wired. I just don't care about that aspect of human. I'm one of these people. I'm sort of like my bulldog Costello was. Like, I'm going to go along with things until you try and push me, and then I just have kind of a resistance thing. It's I don't know, some developmental error or something. Who knows? But
probably healthy.
I think it's helped me a lot because what I've told those people asking for letters is, listen, I think they're not getting strong letters because they're not good enough for tenure at this place.
Yeah.
But that is unusual. Everyone plays this nice game because when you're nice to people, they think you get stuff. And it creates a rather dark underbelly of science that people don't talk about. So in this field of Alzheimer's, what ends up happening, what I think ended up happening was there was such incentive to go with the party line and publish things that were validating of previous papers because let's be honest, when you say nice things about other people in papers, it's easier to get your papers in.
Yeah.
And, scientists on Twitter is changing things because now people will really pick apart a figure, they'll really go after them. I think it's great.
It's great.
It's great. And I learned from you early on and from Lex early on, that if you're going to be out there as a scientist or on social media at all, you have to ignore a lot of stuff. But if there's something to pay attention to, like Lex and I talk about this, I'll just reveal writing an article for one of the Nature journals about science and social media. The journals are now starting to pay attention to podcasts. And so conversation and being able to really rip something apart and having a pretty thick skin about it, that's the nature of good science.